She just wanted to board her flight and get home, but one cold glance and a cruel decision was made. This woman doesn't belong in first class. No questions, no apologies, just humiliation. Her boarding pass was ripped in front of everyone. The flight attendant's smile was tight and judgmental, and the elite passengers around her watched silently, complicit. What no one knew was that the woman they dismissed, the one with the plain leather tote and simple watch, was Aisha Carter, the CEO of one of America's most powerful tech companies, and in just 30 minutes she would do the unthinkable. She would bring an entire airline to its knees. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone ever told you you don't belong here, stay with us until the end, because this story will show how one black woman turned public shame into undeniable power. And if you believe in standing up for what's right, subscribe now. The plane was sleek, new, polished, like it had just rolled out of a showroom. Inside, the first-class cabin shimmered under soft LED lighting, cream leather seats, gold-trimmed menus, a curated wine list presented like a museum exhibit. Passengers settled in with a practiced elegance, the kind that came with flying this way often. A woman in pearls requested her sparkling water with 2 ice cubes. A man in a navy blazer unfolded his Wall Street Journal with a sigh of mild boredom. And then she stepped in. Aisha Carter, mid-30s, black, confident, dressed not for attention but for movement, slim charcoal blazer, soft white blouse, leather flats. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to travel. In her hand, a first-class boarding pass, seat 2A. She paused just inside the cabin, scanning the row, calm, composed, until, "Ma'am," the flight attendant's voice sliced through the cabin like a warning bell. Jessica Reed, blonde, efficient, the type who smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. Jessica stepped forward quickly, intercepting Aisha before she could move farther in. "This is first class," she said, her lips stretched into a taut line. "Economy is that way." Aisha blinked. No reaction, no panic. She simply extended her boarding pass. "I'm aware. Seat 2A. Jessica took it, gave it the briefest glance, and tore it in half. The sound was small, like paper tearing anywhere else. But in that moment, it might as well have been a bomb. "I'm sorry," Jessica said, not sounding sorry at all. "There must be a mistake." The moment stalled. Across the aisle, someone looked up from their tablet. A businessman in 3C lowered his headphones. A woman in 1D paused mid-sip of Chardonnay. A tall woman with a monogrammed handbag and heels that struck like punctuation stepped forward. Karen Langley, blonde, polished, entitled. "I always book 2A, she said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "It's my seat." Jessica turned back to Aisha. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're clearly upsetting our VIP guests." Aisha didn't move, not a step, not a blink. She was used to rooms like this, spaces that whispered, "You don't belong." She had heard that voice since childhood, through rejection letters, job interviews, restaurant lobbies, and now, apparently, airline cabins. She wasn't surprised, but she was done being silent. "I paid for this seat," she said. Calm, direct. Jessica's smile faltered. "You're causing a disturbance." From behind her, a quiet voice whispered, "Start recording." In row 5, Malik Jones, hoodie, sneakers, quiet presence, tilted his phone slightly toward the aisle. He had seen enough. Back at the front of the plane, a single phrase passed through Aisha's mind. Not this time. She didn't know yet how far it would go. But one thing was certain. This flight wasn't going to take off like any other. The tension clung to the cabin like turbulence without warning. Passengers whispered behind glossy sunglasses and whispered from behind raised copies of GQ and The Economist. But Aisha remained still, her breathing even, her voice quiet, controlled. Jessica, now visibly irritated, leaned in again. "Ma'am, I need you to deplane. You're disrupting boarding procedures." Aisha looked directly into her eyes. "Is that the official policy for passengers with confirmed first-class tickets?" Jessica blinked. "Excuse me." You tore my boarding pass without validating it, then told me to leave. I'd like the airline's policy on that, preferably in writing. Karen Langley groaned dramatically from behind. This is absurd. Just put her back in coach and let's move on. Jessica straightened her vest and reached for the intercom. Security to gate 14. Passenger interference. 2 rows back, Malik zoomed his phone in a bit tighter. From behind the curtain near the galley, a figure stepped out. Elena Torres, Senior Operations Officer for Star Air's regional team. She was not scheduled to be on this flight. She was not in uniform. But her presence was not accidental. She had seen the manifest. She had seen the name, Carter, Aisha. Elena observed the growing commotion for several seconds, then moved discreetly toward the rear of the cabin, disappearing into the maintenance corridor, with her tablet already lighting up. Back at the front, Victor Hayes, regional manager of Star Air, stepped into the scene. Barrel-chested, crisp suit, practiced empathy on standby. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, eyes barely grazing Aisha before settling on Jessica. "She's refusing to leave. Claims she bought this seat." "I did," Aisha interjected, showing the email on her phone. "Purchased 2 weeks ago, confirmed seat, non-refundable." Victor didn't even glance at the screen. "We'll sort this later. Right now, I'm asking you to leave this plane voluntarily. And if I refuse, you'll be banned from Star Air permanently." Aisha tilted her head slightly. "For refusing to surrender a seat I paid for, without explanation or cause?" Karen piped up again, louder now. "She stole the seat. She fumbled the ticket like she didn't even know what it meant. This is a scam." Victor raised a hand, but not to silence Karen, to reinforce her words. Aisha said nothing. Instead, she raised her wrist slightly and tapped the side of her smartwatch. A gentle click, silent. But in the Star Air Operations Control Center, a new signal activated. Elena saw it immediately. From her remote tablet, she initiated Phase 1 of the silent escalation protocol, something embedded deep inside the internal comm system, something Aisha herself had architected years ago during a system-wide overhaul. Star Air had paid millions for, and then forgotten who built it. Aisha turned back to Victor, calmly. "I suggest you choose your next words carefully." Victor took a half step forward, his voice lower. "You'll regret this. You're nobody." Aisha's gaze did not move, but her lips did. "No, you're confusing me with someone who doesn't have leverage." From the back, Malik's phone caught every frame. The whispering in the cabin had faded. It was too quiet now, because the first domino had been pushed, and Star Air had no idea what was coming. The cabin wasn't just still, it was charged. Passengers sat motionless, caught in a collective breath they didn't realize they were holding. Jessica took a step back, eyes flicking toward Victor for reassurance. But Victor wasn't looking at her anymore. He was watching Aisha. Something had shifted, the way she stood, the clarity in her tone. It didn't match the script they had rehearsed in countless customer service seminars. She didn't plead. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even flinch when called a thief. She simply watched them. Victor tried again. "This is your final warning. Step off this plane, or we'll have to involve airport authorities." "No need," Aisha said, her voice like polished steel. "You already did when you tore my ticket, when you tried to humiliate me in front of a cabin full of witnesses, when you assumed I didn't belong because I wasn't wearing a label you recognized." Karen scoffed again. "Oh, please, the race card? Really?" Aisha didn't turn. "The facts, actually. Facts recorded on half a dozen phones, on security cams, and," she held up her watch, "inside your own communications network." Victor hesitated. "You're bluffing," Jessica added. "Even if you are, it doesn't matter. Nobody will believe you." At that moment, the overhead speakers crackled to life. Passengers looked up in confusion. Then they heard it. Victor's voice, clear as crystal, piped into every seat of the first-class cabin. "She's gone." Karen's voice followed. "She probably stole the ticket." The words weren't coming from Victor now. They were coming from a live feed, looped, amplified, inescapable. Passengers gasped. Phones were pulled out. Jessica spun toward the cockpit. Who patched that in? 30 feet away, in a quiet booth deep in the operations center, Elena Torres tapped her screen again. The recorded clip played once more. Then again. A man in seat 3C stood up. "That's your voice," he said to Victor, stunned. "That's her voice too. This isn't edited." Aisha remained perfectly still. Karen clutched her pearls, literally, and said, "She hacked us. That's illegal." Aisha's reply was simple. "So is bribery. So is racial discrimination. So is slander." Victor looked like someone had drained all the blood from his face. He reached for the intercom, but stopped when he noticed every passenger's phone was now aimed at him. A live stream was already running. One woman in row 5 was narrating in real time. They tried to kick her out. Then someone leaked their own voices. You won't believe what they said. From his aisle seat, Malik whispered to no one and everyone, "And we got it all." Jessica took a step back, visibly rattled. She had torn up the wrong boarding pass. Now the airline's dirty laundry was being aired in 4K. Victor tried to save control. "This is all being taken out of context." Aisha smiled faintly. "No, Victor, this is the full context, for once." A silence fell again, but it wasn't stillness. It was the sound of the system cracking. The aisle felt longer than ever before. Jessica, once confident in her authority, now stepped back like a child who'd just realized the grown-ups were watching. Karen Langley, still seated in 2A with crossed arms and a face stiff with disbelief, mumbled something about standard slipping and entitled people these days. No one responded. All eyes were on Aisha. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't grandstand, but her presence filled the entire cabin, solid, unmoving, rooted in truth. Victor tried again. "You've made your point," he said, tone slipping into a conciliatory murmur. "Now please, let's avoid further escalation." But the moment had already escalated, just not the way he thought. Near the galley, one of the flight attendants quietly peeled off her name badge and set it in her apron pocket. The shame had reached even her. In the back, Malik's fingers typed furiously on his phone. The video had already crossed 400,000 views in under 5 minutes, and that wasn't counting the reposts. The Don't Star Shame hashtag trended across 3 continents by the time Aisha took one step forward, not away from her seat, but toward the intercom panel. Victor blocked her path. "You touch that, you're violating—" Aisha raised a brow. "Violating what exactly? My right to document my own harassment, or your last shred of plausible deniability?" he faltered. Behind him, Jessica whispered something into her radio. Too late. Elena, down in the operations room, activated the second wave. A new clip began playing over the cabin speakers, shorter, sharper. "Karen, I deserve that window seat. I always book 2A. Jessica, we'll sort it out. Just a misunderstanding. Karen, it's more like a security risk." Passengers turned toward Karen. Her face was beet red now, the veneer cracking. One man in 1D leaned forward. "I paid $5,000 for this seat, not to sit next to bigots." Karen turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "Excused," the man replied, lifting his phone and resuming recording. Jessica looked to Victor, whispering, "We have to shut this down." Victor's reply came out like a gasp. "We can't. It's too late." That's when Aisha said the words that shifted everything. 30 minutes, that's how long it took for a system to reveal itself, for arrogance to expose its own corruption. Karen snorted. "So what? You think some video will make us lose our jobs?" Aisha took another step forward. "I don't think. I know." Malik uploaded the full version to 3 major outlets in seconds. Elena sent secured emails to civil rights attorneys, newsrooms, and aviation watchdog groups. Every word they thought would stay private now echoed through terminals and smartphones. Passengers began clapping, not the polite kind, but the slow, gathering applause of people realizing they were watching history. Victor's radio crackled, a voice from the command center at JFK's main terminal. "Mr. Hayes, please return to base immediately. You're being relieved of duty pending investigation." He froze. Jessica turned pale. Karen fumbled in her purse for her sunglasses, like they might shield her from the backlash. But there was no hiding anymore. Aisha turned to Malik. "Keep filming." He nodded. Behind them, the pilot opened the cockpit door, confused. "What's going on?" Victor tried to regain control. "We had a disruptive passenger. Situation's handled." The pilot raised an eyebrow. "Passengers in her seat, crews falling apart." Aisha smiled faintly. "Now you see it." The flight wouldn't take off that morning, not with a crew in disgrace, not with trending headlines blasting across news networks, and not with Aisha Carter silently dialing a contact in her phone labeled "Legal Team, Emergency Protocol." Star Air had no idea what was coming next. By the time Aisha was calmly escorted off the plane, not by security, but by her own quiet choice, the airport terminal buzzed with a tense electricity. Dozens of passengers had stayed behind, watching the drama unfold like a live-action reckoning. Some were silent, others muttered in disbelief, but nearly all had their phones raised. A digital reckoning had begun, and the footage wasn't slowing down. Aisha walked with quiet poise, like a general leaving a battlefield she'd already won. Outside Gate B12, reporters had already started arriving. Someone at the terminal had leaked the audio. As Aisha passed through the corridor, a whisper followed her. "She's the CEO. That's Aisha Carter. That's her." At first, the murmurs were disbelief. Then came awe, then fury, not at Aisha but at Star Air. Because while the flight crew had dismissed her as a nobody, the world quickly realized she was the mind behind Tech Trend Innovations, the tech company powering over 40% of the airline's internal operations. The woman they tried to push out of first class was the very architect of their systems. That's when the dominoes truly began to fall. Inside Star Air's New York headquarters, the red phones started ringing. Legal, PR, IT. The boardroom scrambled as alerts poured in. Stock dropping. Influencers calling for boycott. Multiple civil rights groups requesting immediate statement. CNN requesting live interview with Ms. Carter. Internal documents leaked, confirmed authentic. Richard Langston, the airline's CEO, stood at the head of a long polished table, his fists clenched, his voice sharp. All of this over one damn seat. But he knew the truth. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about everything. He turned to his left. Victor Hayes, still flushed and shaken, sat in silence. Jessica's name was being torn apart across every corner of the internet. Karen Langley had disappeared from her Florida villa, her name now synonymous with elitist arrogance. The corporate machine that once silenced complaints now found itself exposed, naked before the eyes of a raging public. And Aisha, she wasn't done. She stepped into a private conference room within the terminal. No cameras, no microphones, just her, Elena Torres, and a quiet server humming beside them. Elena passed her a folder, labeled Star Air, Liability Index. Inside, internal chat logs mocking black and brown passengers, secret directives on visual-based reassignment, a payment trail confirming bribes to keep the elite in comfort and the undesirables in economy. Audio files of Jessica Reed laughing while justifying accidental downgrades, all time-stamped, all verified. Elena looked at Aisha. "It's all here, everything they buried." Aisha nodded once. "Good." At that moment across the country, the board members of Star Air were receiving encrypted copies of the files. In the corner of the terminal, Malik Jones live-streamed with a headline, "She was denied her seat. Now she owns the airline's future." He didn't exaggerate. Because 30 minutes after being humiliated, Aisha Carter had already grounded the flight, ignited a national scandal, triggered a federal investigation, and was preparing to walk into a room where she'd rewrite the future of one of the most powerful airlines in America. And she hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. Truth was speaking loud enough. The double doors of Star Air's executive boardroom opened without ceremony. No assistant announced her. No secretary rushed to introduce her. Aisha Carter walked in alone, carrying no briefcase, no legal entourage, just her presence. Her posture was calm, yet immovable. Her expression, controlled fury, hidden beneath dignity. The room, glass-walled and overlooking the Manhattan skyline, froze. CEO Richard Langston stood instinctively, unsure if it was out of respect or fear. Around the oval table, board members shifted in their seats, some tightening ties, others avoiding her gaze. Karen Langley's voice echoed through a large screen on the far end, joining via video from her Florida villa. Even pixels couldn't hide the tension in her eyes. Aisha didn't speak right away. She placed a slim folder on the table. It landed with a soft thud, yet its presence felt like thunder. Richard reached for it. Inside, undeniable proof of misconduct, Victor Hayes approving racial downgrades, Jessica Reed's derogatory memos, Karen Langley's frequent bribes disguised as client loyalty gestures, dozens of pages, dozens of truths. Victor spoke first, his voice tight. "This is being taken out of context," Karen interjected from the screen. "This is a smear campaign. She hacked our systems." Aisha turned to her calmly. "I used my own systems. Your software runs on tech trend code. I never had to hack anything. You gave me the keys when you licensed it." The boardroom went silent. Denise Callahan, one of the most senior members, looked at Aisha. "What exactly do you want?" Aisha met her eyes. "Accountability, effective immediately. You will fire Victor Hayes. You will terminate Jessica Reed. You will cancel Karen Langley's platinum privileges, and you will publicly announce your partnership with Tech Trend to launch a full-scale anti-bias transformation initiative." Victor scoffed. "You think you can walk in here and make demands like that?" "I don't think," Aisha replied. "I know." She paused. "Refuse, and every Tech Trend license you rely on will be revoked. Your reservation system, routing algorithms, customer support platform, everything you depend on will go dark. Your competitors will know. Your investors will flee." Richard looked at her, then at the documents, then at the blinking light on his phone. A new alert. Star Air stock down 32%. He sighed. "Fine. Hayes is out. Reed too. Karen, your contract is void as of now." Karen's mouth fell open on screen. "Richard, you can't." He didn't even look at her. "You bribed an operations manager. On camera." Karen's feed cut off. Aisha didn't flinch. "This isn't revenge," she said. "It's structure. You have a chance to rebuild. You will start by signing on to a program called Fairfly, a partnership between Tech Trend and Sky Pulse Airlines that monitors passenger interactions and enforces equity in real time." Denise leaned forward. "And if we agree?" Aisha tapped her tablet. The screen behind her lit up, revealing a woman in a navy blue suit, Sarah Ningwan, CEO of Sky Pulse. "We've already begun implementation. You'll be joining as a pilot partner, or you'll be left behind." Richard hesitated. "We'll need legal review." "You have 2 hours," Aisha said. "After that, the full liability index goes public." It wasn't a negotiation, it was a final offer. Richard Langston finally nodded. "Send the documents." Aisha smiled faintly. "You're making the right decision." But even then she wasn't done. "There's one more thing," she added. "You owe the people you hurt, not just with apologies, but with action." And with that, she walked toward the whiteboard, picked up a marker and began writing the blueprint of a new future, not just for Star Air, but for the entire industry. One flight had denied her dignity. Now she was making sure dignity had a seat on every flight. 3 weeks after the confrontation that nearly toppled Star Air, the airline's headquarters looked nothing like the empire of silence it once was. Gone were the backdoor meetings and quiet cover-ups. In their place, glass-walled offices, posted codes of ethics, and open sessions for staff to express concerns, without fear. And at the center of it all, in an office 3 floors below the executive suite, was Aisha Carter. Her name wasn't on the board. She didn't ask for a C-level title. She rejected the label of consultant. She was here for something far bigger than personal recognition. She was here to build a system where dignity had no expiration date. The first initiative launched under her guidance was blunt in name, sharper in purpose. Bias doesn't fly. Every Star Air employee, from customer service agents to upper management, would now undergo quarterly real-time anti-discrimination training. No corporate slideshow, no checkbox quizzes. Aisha brought in civil rights educators, behavioral psychologists, and equity engineers. Sessions involved real passenger scenarios, live interaction, and hard, uncomfortable questions. Resistance was inevitable. Some employees rolled their eyes, others whispered about wokeness or claimed it was overkill. But when the first team of gate agents passed the evaluations with excellence and were promoted not for compliance, but for compassion, the tide began to turn. Change wasn't fast, but it was undeniable. Malik Jones, the young man who had once quietly filmed the injustice in Row 2A, was now one of the most visible figures in the company. He had been offered a formal role, Director of Passenger Equity, the youngest in the airline's history. He took the stage at Star Air's first-ever Transparency and Transformation Forum and answered a question from a high school student live-streaming the event. "Why did you stay after what you saw?" His reply was simple: because if someone like Aisha Carter believes this place can change, who am I to doubt it? But Aisha wasn't done. In parallel, she and her team at Tech Trend launched a revolutionary AI platform, Fairfly, a cloud-based system designed to detect bias in real-time interactions, track passenger treatment, and flag systemic irregularities across the airline industry. Audio recordings, upgrade decisions, tone of voice, even digital ticketing logs, everything was analyzed. It wasn't about punishment, it was about prevention. Every flag required human review. Every review was archived for transparency. Delta pushed back. So did United. But when Sky Pulse adopted it and publicly praised the system's integrity, the industry shifted. Civil rights groups applauded. Passenger satisfaction rose. Complaints dropped. Social media began referring to Star Air as the airline that owned its mistakes. The redemption arc had begun. Elena Torres, once the silent observer near the galley, was now VP of Systems Ethics. Her job, ensure Star Air never returned to its old ways. Her department had direct oversight, independent funding, and complete transparency. Nothing got buried. Nothing went unacknowledged. Aisha, despite all the noise and momentum, remained as quiet as ever in her leadership. She wasn't chasing legacy. She was planting one. One day, she received a letter on her desk. No name, no return address, just a handwritten note. "I was wrong. I see it now. If there's still a place for people who want to make it right, I'd like to try. J.R. Jessica Reed." Aisha folded the letter. She didn't smile, but she didn't discard it either. She placed it in a folder labeled Second Chance, a program she had created quietly to offer former employees, those willing to grow, a structured path back to the industry they once stained. It didn't erase the past. It redeemed it. 6 months after the incident that shattered the illusion of untouchable power, the name Star Air no longer evoked prejudice, scandal, or systemic decay. Instead, it had become a case study in redemption. Passengers who once avoided the airline now returned. Civil rights organizations that once condemned it now collaborated on policy design. And the employees, those who stayed, those who learned, became the heartbeat of its evolution. In a ceremony hosted at the 25th Annual Global Airline Expo, Star Air was awarded the Human Dignity and Service Award, a milestone previously reserved for humanitarian organizations, not corporate airlines. But Aisha Carter wasn't there to accept it. She had declined the spotlight. Instead, she stood quietly in the shadows of an airport tarmac in Atlanta. Next to her were a dozen teenage students boarding their very first flight, a scholarship trip to visit top universities around the country. Most had never flown before. All of them had come through Fly Equal, a silent initiative Aisha funded from her own pocket. The goal? To give underserved youth access to travel, education, and opportunity. No press, no fanfare, just boarding passes and a future. As the students climbed the staircase into the aircraft, one girl, no older than 15, paused at the door, turned, and looked back. "Are you coming with us?" Aisha smiled softly. "I've already been where you're going. Now it's your turn." The door closed. The engines roared. The aircraft lifted into the sky, rising steady and smooth against the late afternoon sun. Behind her, Aisha turned. Her coat fluttered in the breeze. Her steps were measured, precise. The work wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about progress. And Aisha Carter didn't just win. She changed the flight path of an entire industry. She showed the world that one voice, steady, brave, and unrelenting, can ground corruption and give wings to a better future. Not with vengeance, but with vision. So now we ask you, have you ever stood up for what's right, even when the world told you to sit down? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe dignity should travel with every passenger, subscribe, because this movement is just getting started.